Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is Chris Niccolls here, and boy, do we have an exciting video for you today because we have the brand new Fujifilm XF 16 to 50 f2.8 to 4.8. This is the new kit lens for high-end Fuji cameras. Hey guys, now before we get into our review, I just want to mention that this is a pre-production lens that we have from Fujifilm, but the 16 to 50 has final hardware and it's just the firmware that needs to be updated and it's minor. Fujifilm has assured us that we can put this lens through our usual tests, so let's get to it. Now I know you're thinking, Chris, kit lens is a dirty word. Why the should I, an advanced photographer, give a damn about this piece of kit lens? And here's why, because this is actually now replacing Fujifilm's 18 to 55 f2.8 to 4, and that was a very good lens, even though it was a kit. I mean, we did a ranking of our favorite kit lenses of all time, and the 18 to 55 came out second, and as well we tested it against a modern Sigma 18 to 50 lens, and we were surprised how well the now venerable 18 to 55 held up. So it's a fantastic lens with a long legacy. Can the 16 to 50 improve on that legacy? Okay, so today my X-mount camera of choice is going to be the new X-T50. Because it's got that 40 megapixel sensor and I really want to test that here on the 16 to 50 lens. The other thing I should mention, the X-T50 has IBIS built into it, and that's a good thing because the new 16 to 50 has no image stabilization whatsoever. That's not really a big downside. I mean, most modern Fujifilm bodies are going to have IBIS built in, with the exception of their very entry-level lineup and like the X Pro 3, but pretty much everything else does, so I'm not too worried about missing out on it. You know, this building's interesting because Jordan actually helped crew and shoot a movie here called Berlin Castro, but much like his filmmaking aspirations, everything's now boarded up and abandoned, covered in graffiti and made into a toilet. So it has nothing to do with the lens. Let's keep going. So let's talk about the body design on the XF 16 to 50. So first off, very interesting, when you zoom this lens, there's no extension, unlike the 18 to 55. As well, this is weather sealed. That was something the 1855 never had. Both have linear motors, both have very similar 58mm filter threads, but this is actually lighter. Although the 1855 was 310 grams, this managed to squeeze everything down to 240 grams. Otherwise, we have a very similar kind of feel. Manual focus ring here, nice tight zoom ring, and we do have an aperture ring, which we can turn into either auto aperture or clickable stops. So the leading line like this, one of the things I do like about the new kit lens, 28mm equivalent's just fine, but having the 24 here just gives it a little extra sense of depth, and I like the extra space that I get in the field of view. Now, the original 1855 was actually one of the first lenses that had a linear motor, and it focused really quick. That was one of the strong points of that lens. So of course, this also has to have a linear motor. The 1650 does focus very quickly, as you can see here, nice and snappy. I think for all the stuff you're going to use a lens like this for, general purpose photography, it's going to do a great job. All right, let's talk about flare and sunstars. We gave this the camera store test by using a punishing Amaran 60-watt cob light here. And you can see with flare, we are getting a little bit of flare there. Contrast is actually really well maintained. There's some ghosting even wide open. The ghosting does become just a little bit more clear when you're shooting stop down, but actually not excessively so. So overall, I'd say this lens is actually handling bright light sources quite well. Now, as you can kind of see here, the sun has broken out on our cloudy day a little bit, so we did get some sunstar tests as well. We weren't expecting a lot out of this lens, and that's exactly what we got. We really didn't get very nice sunstars. I mean, you can see here, they're quite blah. There's no definition. There's no real sharpness to the points on the stars, but that's what we expected to get. So the 16 to 50mm lens is an f2.8 maximum aperture at 16, a lot like the f2.8 aperture at 18mm on the 18 to 55. But when you go to the telephoto range, we're now 50mm at f4.8, not 55mm at f4 like the older lens. So this means that the 1650 doesn't quite give us the shallow depth of field that we would see on the other lens. And when we look at bokeh, this is what I'm kind of finding. First off, specular highlights. You can see here at 16mm is actually quite nice. At 50mm though, we do get a little bit of a cat's eye effect in the corners, not major, and that goes away pretty quick when you stop down. Specular highlights stay nice and round when you stop down, but I will say that there's a fairly strong soap bubble effect and even onion rings there in the lens. And again, on a more affordable kit lens, that is to be expected. The transitions between in-focus to out-of-focus might not be as smooth as you would find on some of the higher-end lenses, and the backgrounds have a little bit of a frenetic look to them, but again, this isn't really a super shallow depth of field lens. So I feel like a kit lens should be versatile, so I want to test the close-up capability. We got these beautiful flowers here to try out. It's about the only live flowers we're finding this time of year. So here you can see at 16 millimeters, the lens is at 24 centimeters minimum focusing distance, but you're not getting that good a macro reproduction. However, we go to 50 millimeters, this gets much better. We get that same working distance, but we're getting a tighter view. Here we're getting about 1 to 3 life-size reproduction, and that's great for just casual close-up photography. So I mean, let's face it, the 1855 is a great lens, but it's starting to show its age. It's been around for a long time. In fact, it was Fujifilm's 4th lens that they released for their X-mount cameras. So it's about time that it has a replacement. The other issue is, can it resolve on the latest 40 megapixel sensors? Well, stick around because we're actually going to talk about here near the end. But let's talk about the sharpness on the actual 16 to 50 and what our test chart showed there. So first off, looking at 16 millimeters here in the center of the image, shooting wide open at f2.8, excellent sharpness. I was actually very impressed by that. Right away, wide open, very good results. Stopping on to f5.6 makes almost no difference. When we look to the corners at 16 mil, wide open at f2.8, it does get a little bit soft as you can see here, but when we stop down to f5.6, it sharpens up quite nicely. So now let's look at the 16 to 50 at the 50 millimeter range. Now I do feel like this lens does a little bit more sharpness at 16 millimeters, but at 50 mil it's still quite good. Take a look here in the centers at f4.8, its widest maximum aperture. You can see that it's still very sharp, pretty good detail, but it does improve when you stop the lens down to f5.6. Looking at the corners though, it is actually a little bit more consistent than the wide angle range on this lens. 50 mil here in the corners at 4.8, you can see it's a touch soft. We go to 5.6, that does improve, but it's already pretty good to start with.
Since the original 18 to 55 was released, Fujifilm have made real strides when it comes to their video performance, so we got to take a look at how the new lens is going to handle video shooting. And there are a few nice advantages compared to the old one here. First of all, that internal zoom means this is going to be quite easy to balance on a gimbal if you wanted to do that. The other real advantage is going down to a 16 millimeter starting point means a lot of the modes on the Fujifilm cameras, like using digital stabilization or shooting 60 frames per second, incur a bit of a crop. This will help offset that a little bit. One nice thing we're seeing on a lot of the recent Fujifilm bodies is the ability to have linear response when you're pulling focus. But if you do, you should be aware that at both sides of the zoom range, if you pull focus from minimum to infinity or pulling focus from one subject to another one, you will see the frame change a little bit. And it can be quite distracting. It's a little annoying. And of course, this is a floating aperture lens. That means if you're in low light, you're going to see the image darken dramatically as you go from the wide angle to the telephoto.
So I've had a fun time comparing both lenses today and really looking at new versus old. And what does the 1855 have going for it? Well, it does have built-in image stabilization, which is nice, but I feel like most of the modern bodies are going to mitigate that issue with their built-in IBIS. As well, the 1855 has a nice range and it does let in a little bit more light at the telephoto end, absolutely. However, when it came to sharpness, as you can see here, the 1855 doesn't quite compete with the new 16 to 50. I mean, we're talking about 40 megapixel sensors now becoming more common in the APS-C line, and the 1855 just can't quite resolve them. And in the telephoto range, I feel like the 50 millimeter on the 16 to 50 does a better job, despite being slower in its aperture, just getting that extra detail and sharpness that you need for the higher resolution sensors. And then when you look at the 16 to 50, I mean, it's weather resistant, it's smaller, it's lighter, it doesn't extend when you zoom it, and it is sharper. I mean, these are important benefits going forward. So I think Fujifilm's made a good choice here. If I had some of the older bodies, the 24, 26 megapixel sensors, I wouldn't be in a rush to upgrade. The 1855 is going to do a great job there. But going forward, or if you're looking at a 40 megapixel APS-C censored Fujifilm, you absolutely are going to want the 16 to 50 as a kit lens. Leave those comments below, guys, as usual. We always appreciate that. Check out the PetaPixel podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. You can just listen to it there or watch it on this YouTube channel if you want to see us and our beautiful faces. Otherwise, we'll see you guys soon with more episodes on PetaPixel.